Okay, my outstanding friends, another shocker du jour from the home of the shocker du jour, Mudfossil University on YouTube. Now, what are we going to be discussing today? Hoodoos. Now, I had a request from somebody, I don't remember who it was. They said, can you look into the hoodoos? And I had another request from somebody. They said, can you describe what you're seeing in the layering of the Grand Canyon? You're talking about the Grand Canyon and you're doing this and that, go into some detail. Okay, no problem. I'll do the two at the same time. Now, before we can get started with the hoodoos, you have to get a grasp on reality. I'm not kidding you. You got to start with reality, and most people have no clue about reality. This is reality. Let's take a look at reality. So when I say you have to get a grasp on reality, look at these blocks. These are enormous, and I mean they are huge, like 30 feet by that type of thing, huge. These are the canyon walls. And there's clearly a chunk of stuff missing here. We're going to be going into this deeper, and then we're going to go into the hoodoos. But you have to understand, what you're here looking at right there is biology. And you say, whoa, what do you mean by biology? What do you mean by that? Well, biology, I mean that was the guts. I believe either that or it could even be up in the skin area. But these are tight junction cells. All right, these are tight junction cells that covered some kind of a surface. And below that was the layers of tissue that they really don't understand how many layers there are. This is from a good-sized creature, but certainly nothing like this, I'm quite obviously. Now, every layer in there has literally hundreds of more layers inside each layer. You can see to some degree in the microscope. But when you look at these layers here, there's not just one layer here and another here and another here and another. There's hundreds of them in each one of those layers. This side you can see a little better how many there are, but in each one of these little stripes, there's literally hundreds more. The number of layers of tissue that's in the human body or in any creature's body is just staggeringly large, and it's not well understood, I don't think. So we're going to be looking at some canyon walls, because those will be the layers of tissue that are in the creature's body. But first of all, you got to understand there's going to be a membrane of some sort. And in this case, I'll show you what cellular junctions look like, and they look just like this. All right, you can see that, I'm sure. Okay, my friends, all I can say is stay tuned, because eventually we're going to get around to these hoodoos and exactly what they are. And I claim that I have presented evidence that is uncontested, backed by every scientific way possible, including chemistry and some of it DNA tested, CAT scan, all of these things. I have supported every word I have ever said with literal factual evidence, which this will be literal factual evidence very shortly to explain exactly how these are formed and what they are from. Now, I will never present anything and say and claim it 100% unless I know precisely what it is, and I do know precisely what this is. And I will claim this 100%, and you will agree, I think, if you're thinking. So you have to stay with me on this. We're going to get to this. I got some stuff to go through, and it's a new day in the universe, my friends. All right, my friends, he says it's impossible geometry. These squares, these little blocks, what are they? I know what they are, and I'm going to show you what they are. And they are biology, and this is a coding of a layer of basement skin, or it could be a fascia that surrounds some kind of an organ or something, but it's flat, so it's kind of hard to tell. But there's big gouges taken out of here in the Grand Canyon, and I believe I understand that too, because we were basically hit by Venus. Velikovsky said almost hit. I say I think we were hit, and it bounced right off of the Grand Canyon and just kept on going, and eventually ended up causing a problem at Mars, and that's why Mars is dead as a doornail. All right, don't forget now, this is outer range, and I'm just going to take a couple of shots off of his video to show the terrain and what you're looking at, and all this real deep red color and these big huge gouges and these unexplained anomalies that nobody can explain until you look at it with mud fossil eyes. Okay, this is a great shot. You can see the gouge coming out of here and all these different layers of tissues. Now, I'm going to try to get as best shot I can of this. Now, this is also an interesting feature here. It's almost like when you see green like that, I always go for blood. Was there some form of a bloody area there? I mean, you need blood for everything, and you can see there's blood all throughout this tissue. So that's just something we'll have to look into. But you can see the fabric here, and basically there is no doubt that is a biological pattern. That doesn't happen there's nobody can explain this other than biology. No, there's no doubt there's been erosion here. But you see all these different layers? On all these different, and there's this guy standing on one of these blocks. These blocks are very, very big. And it was all one layer at one time of tissues underneath these blocks. Where all those other blocks went, let's think about it. Where would they have gone? They didn't just wash away here. They got ripped out of here. Now look down in there. You don't see these big blocks down in there. There's some down here, but not, you'd expect them to be just everywhere. In other words, this would have just sort of fallen down in here. And they're not arranged that way. They're just ripped out of here. Something came through here and just ripped this thing to shreds. The Grand Canyon is a grand trench. And the same thing happened on Mars. And Mars was worse. You see that? That's on Mars. And that thing is wider than the whole United States. And a huge, huge trench right across it because Venus hit it. And Venus has the same marks to show it absorbed Mars' magnetic field. This is magnetic discharge. This is welding arc into Venus. This is in, just like a welder would do. There's nobody can deny that. Any welder, anybody that knows welding at all understands that's what a welding arc will do. Now, I think there was two impacts in the same area, one here and one here. That's what it looks like to me. And I see the way the fields go. I don't know, to be honest with you, but let's just say there's one impact. Who cares? This is energy into Venus as Venus impacted with something. And the ancient texts say Jupiter gave birth, literally gave birth to Venus. And it came down and hit Earth and then hit Mars and wiped Mars out. And that wasn't that long ago, my friends. That's what they say. So you just saw the impact here, or the absorption, and this is the impact. And we have the same thing, only we call it the Grand Canyon. And this is what Jupiter was supposed to have given birth to, was a planet this size from the red spot, which is not a storm. That is a mound, a Venus mons, plowing through very dense, soupy atmosphere, causing the swirl as it goes past. It's as simple as that. It's not a storm. And when they went up and looked at it very closely, it is literally a vagina. All right, take a little time and look at that. Now, maybe you haven't seen one, I don't know. But I study anatomy, and that, my friends, has every bit of the anatomical attributes of a human vagina. And the one that really got me was this attachment down here. It's being pushed this way. You can see the soupy things are coming past this way, and it's gonna force this to come down a little bit. We're seeing that. And we're seeing the whole thing is sort of being wrenched this way, so this is off to an angle. Normally that would be straight up and down. This whole thing is being tried to twist this way. You can see it. And on the other side, it's pushing down this way too, because the whole thing is coming through that soup. And this one here is where it's swirling and forcing it to go that way. And this one's sort of bending around. And these are what the labias, majorna and minora, or minor or something like that. Anyway, and it's got even the hair spots all the way around here. It's got everything. It's got everything. All the detail is there, 100%. And that is the one that really got me, that tag right there, because that's the one thing that this will have, and it is reacting exactly what it should. Everything's trying to go this way, and it's holding it, saying, no, you're not going that far. And it's holding it solid. And I'm going to show you, just so that we know I'm not making this up, I'm going to show you a real one in basically a very, very graphic picture. And it will show that spot. And in addition to that, these two dots I have found in every organ where it dumps its tag just like that. And they all have a tag just like that to hold the organs in place. And that's what it does. It's holding it in place. And it's doing a good job. Otherwise, it would have been shifted over here. Those two dots give way to the lymph fluids that are in the fluid-filled highway. This is unknown right now. They think it's all just one big system, and it's just everybody shares everything. I don't think it's that way. I think the fluids go in, and they come back out through the lymph ducts somehow. How, I don't know. But this was a very, very close shot. And that's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Let me just show you so there was no mistakes. All right, my friends, not anything to do with pornography or any of that. I have to prove my claims about that anchor. Now, get ready, because this is very graphic. This is basically identical to what you saw on Venus. And that is the tab that I talked about. Now, because that soup is coming by, this is called the Venus Mons, and it's a mound just like that. And as that very dense atmosphere is coming by, it's trying to force this thing to twist this way, get out of the way. That's why you see all the swirls coming around. And it's pushing it this way. That's why this was angled in this angle. Otherwise, it'd be straight up and down. That's where it is. It keeps it centered in the body cavity. It's just Mother Nature. I'm not playing games here. And it moves this way, because it's trying to wrench it this way. We saw the stuff going that way. You know, the tissues trying to be forced. That's why it was strapped over that way. And the 2 dots are for the, I believe they're the lymphatic system. And right now that's not fully understood at this moment. But I do believe that's the case. And every place I have found where things attach to other things, they're going to anchor in your body somewhere, and there's going to be one of these attachment type things. And they transfer fluids from one body part to the next into their fascia coating, which is a complete membrane. You have to have a membrane surrounds it, and nothing can get through that membrane or it'll attack you. So that membrane it's on its own. It's like a big rubber bag, and then the 2 tubes come out of that rubber bag through that attachment right there. That's what I'm pretty sure. I found it in my other mud fossils, and I can see things that doctors can't see. All right, what I have in a microscope is one of these attachments, and I'm going to show it to you up in the screen, and then I'm going to explain it to you. All right, that attachment right there, those 2 spots. You see, first of all, a different color, very bright white, darker color. They come down and they run up through these tubes. It comes down and runs up through this tube. That's the in and out of the fascia that coated this chunk of meat. This somehow attached to the next body part. And through these 2 little fluid-filled chambers, somehow it went into the next body part, which could have been a lung or a heart or a kidney or the body proper. But you can see, you see that? You see that? Now, I think there might be an organ involved in this process, because I think every body part has a separate type of fluid that surrounds it, because you're not going to have the same fluid surrounding your stomach, all those acids, as you would surrounding your lungs. I wouldn't think. Maybe you do, but I don't. Maybe not. I don't know. Something hasn't been checked, and I've been talking to people that do this kind of stuff, and they haven't checked for it, and they don't know about these spots either. This is unknown to medical science right at this moment. So anyway, I'm going to show you the piece that I'm talking about. It's right down here in a microscope, and we were looking at the 2 little dots to transfer that fluid. So let's get some light on this subject. And what we were just looking at is right here. Right at the tip of that little triangle. Hold on. You can't get away from those vaginas. All right. This is that triangle. You see that? And right at the tip of that triangle is those 2 little dots that I was showing you. Those transfer the fluids. This is a piece of meat. And there's a anchor right above on them. They have the anchor, and then they have a little flap that just flaps over onto some other body part. It looks like to me. I'm not sure. But this is the anchor for here. This is basically where that vagina was, where that ball, that round spot was, and then a strap coming down. This is basically a very similar thing. And the 2 dots, the same thing. You can see it right here. It's basically the same thing. There's an anchor here. It tags it in solid. And then there's the strap coming down that goes to wherever it goes. In this case, it goes to the body proper. And that's where Venus was born. That's what it says in the ancient text. The whole world had the same story. Now let me show you something that's a little concerning. This is what's happening now. This is 2019. And it says this is only about a week from May 25th to June 1st. It started giving out blood. Blood started running out of there. You see this? They said plates of blood, sheets of blood were running out, and it turned bulbous looking like that. I don't know what it's doing now. I don't see any real research on it, to be honest with you. But we live in a universe that we just never expected, and where that guy was standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon, he's where he was standing on. Plasma membrane. All right, these are the different type of cell junctions, and you have tight cell junctions, you had adherons, you got the desmonas, you got this, you got that. These are the fabric. It's just like a fabric. They used to call it tunica. It wraps everything. And then underneath you have all your layers. Now this is, whatever it was, this is the layer, let's call it the basement layer of skin. Let's just say it that way. I don't know if that's true or not, but let's call it that way. Underneath is going to be all these layers of flesh. Now I want you to look very carefully, because that's not just one layer here. This is like a fluid-filled highway, I believe, which almost always is right below the layer that insulates you from the rest of the world. There's a fluid-filled highway that is your protection. Below that is about a bazillion. Below this layer of fluid-filled highway, you got about a zillion layers of tissue. That's not just one layer. There's layer after layer after layer after layer. And they don't see this. They divide up the skin and so forth as a certain number of layers. Like, I forget how many, epidermis, dermis, yada, yada, yada. But there's literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of layers. It's hard to believe how unbelievably complicated the tissue layering system is. It's just phenomenal. And that gives you all the strength and ability to move and flexibility, but you got to keep it moving. Once you just don't let it move anymore, it locks up. All right, and somewhere in here I said that the tag that holds the vagina in was on Venus. That is not the case. It is on Jupiter. Venus came out of Jupiter, and that tag is what holds body parts together, and you'll see it or have seen it. All right, this is a pretty good shot here. You see how many layers there is there? I mean, it's a stunning number of layers, and that's not very thick actually compared. It's not. This is very thin amount of distance compared to some of the walls in the canyons there. In the area he's in, the canyon walls are not that steep. Some of them are just phenomenal. All right, now he pans around here, and then he comes to where they drive around the side of the cliff. But think about how many layers there are in here that you wouldn't see unless they had that little bit of erosion. But even the layers that you do see, inside of those layers, there's more layers. Like I say, his canyon walls are not deep. These are better, but not a whole lot deeper. Now, I think I'm seeing probably sarcomeres. It's hard to say. It's very red. I'm not sure what he's I would go with sarcomeres, because you can see the little blocks in them. The sarcomeres are blocky. That's what they came back from Bennu with, was sarcomeres, blocky tissue. And this you got to get really up close. Yeah, I go with sarcomeres. You see the little block. hard to say, really hard to say, but it's some form of layers of tissue, which is like this. Only in this particular area, there was a lot of red blood. Probably there was a heart or lungs or kidney, a liver, something like that right in this area where there was a lot of red blood ran off. And that will change this same, if it was this would become red if it was in the area where that was. That's all. No difference whatsoever. That's why I say it to everybody. I say anything can become anything. It depends on what the condition it was in. The conditions of entombment. All right, because it took a little while for these things to absorb the conditions that they were in. They all boiled from a hot boiling flood when Venus hit Earth. It was so much energy that the oceans boiled. And Harvard and Stanford and all of them now are saying, yes, they agree, the oceans did boil and formed the mud fossils. I don't know if they agree about forming the mud fossils, but this is what happened. And my mud fossils, the ones I have that are DNA tested, CAT scan, there's no stopping it now. It's too late to hide from this anymore. We got to see what it means to our past and possible future. But these are layers and layers and layers. I'm going to see if I can find some better layers, some deep gouges, because this is just gouged and got torn to shreds. That's why we're down inside the bowels of a beast. I'm not kidding you. You go through that top layer, you went through skin, you went through some kind of fabric down into the bowels of the beast, and there's areas in here where you're really into literal guts. Their stomach, intestines, those hoodoos, all of that stuff. Okay, so once again, my claim is that is biology, and this is the outside of the intestine, and these are the intestinal villi, and we're going to look at them a little bit closer. All right, look at this carefully now. What's causing this white layer? Oh, that's erosion. All right, well, what's causing all these little things up here at the top? Oh, that's erosion. That's erosion, yeah, that's erosion. That's sedimentation, erosion, freezing, thawing. They got all kinds of explanations. So what caused this over there? Well, obviously it was some form of an erosive concretion. They go on and on and on. No. I say no. Absolutely not. That is not what happened here. This is the bowels of the beast being ripped out and pushed down into Mexico, basically. This is a shot from All May. This is the Fair Use Act. I'm just showing it for educational purposes. This is what we're just looking at Bryce Canyon. Weathered away, turned into, transitioned into mud fossil. But the guts of this beast were ripped out by some kind of an impact, I believe, by Venus. Here's another All-May photo, and these are the same things. These are what happens inside the gut. They absorb food coming through your gut. That's what stomach tissue lining and villi does. And here's, another shot. And here's what it is in a gigantic creature. And this stuff here absorbs. Those are the absorbers that absorb your food. They're inside of here. And what else can I say? That's it. Now, you say that's impossible, that's too big, that's crazy. Well, I didn't say it isn't. It is crazy. This is a membrane. You see all these little spots hanging around each one of these little blocks? This was at one time in a creature's body, and this was the lower part of the membrane. Membranes are thick. There's an upper layer right there. And then there's a lower layer right here. Things go through these holes. These holes were built in. Nobody put these holes here. These holes are part of the creature's body, and they allowed things to go through one way or the other. This creature was staggeringly, enormously large. This is a minimum 6 feet from here to here. I can't remember, but about, let's say 6 feet. 6 foot thick membrane. That is, in us, you could hold it up and look right through it. You can make a window pane out of it, basically. They are so thin, it's unbelievable. Now, that's just one thing here. And here's what the membranes look like. Where are they? So it's exactly what you were looking at. And because they had those little edges around each one of these blocks, there was like a layer of putty, well, not putty, but like goo. It's mucus. And that sealed all of those little spots. So think of it this way. If I took a goo and I slurred the whole thing, the best possible way for it to stay glued together is by having little seams in here, just the way it does. And there you just putty it over. Putty, 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 and you end up with this, all this slurpy down in between, and then you can do all that kind of stuff with it, and it's still, you know, it can do that because you got a bunch of goo in between every block, and that's why they have all this. It's fabulously engineered. I mean, fabulous. When I look at things, I say, "Whoa, what's that? What's this doing here? What's that doing here?" What? It makes sense. It all makes sense once you can put it together and you can open your eyes big enough to see the true nature of the world. Then it becomes crazy. See these? Those are the same things I was showing you from before. These are somewhere in the gut area. And there's several different areas, and we don't know what kind of creatures we're dealing with. So what I have found, everything I have found is red-blooded, first of all. And I have found dragons and Quetzalcoatl and other things that I don't know what their internal structure is, but I would assume it's similar to ours. They have to absorb, and they have to poop, and they have to do all the things we do, I imagine. And they did in gigantic creatures. I mean, absolutely stunningly large. Huge, 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 huge creature. As a matter of fact, you see this? That right there is a tendon fibril. Flat as a pancake. They didn't cut that. They come up flat, just as flat, and I have them right here in my shop. Exact same thing, only a smidge smaller. There's a flat. There's a layer on top of this, all around it. Lets it slide, and they were just about to pop this off. They got holes underneath. They were going to pop it right off. You see this? This layer right under here is the layer that wraps around that. I have some of these. I have the exact same stuff. And here's some in the microscope. Right there. That's the exact same thing as Baalbek. And it comes up to glue, literally glue. And it goes in and glues that strap. And they can pull here and there. And that's where the Slurpee is in between. You see, here's one over here, here's one here, there's one over there. And I have this in my shop. I have just about everything, you know, to do with this stuff. I understand it very, very well. And this is just basically glue. And it glues right into that tendon fibril. You know, they're pretty good size. This one's, you know, very good size. And it died like this because you can see the red blood is running down this way. So they didn't tip it up or do anything to it. It was like this. And the red blood has run out this way. And that would have been underneath that layer. And they probably popped that layer off. And I see they did the same thing on all of these back here too. So they didn't just take them from here. And then they probably 2 or 3 guys picked it up and carried it where they had to go. These guys were just absolutely stunningly large. And this is on Mars. And this is not continually over millions of years. This was a creature's body. Those are muscle sarcomeres. And what's left is the connective tissue, and the very fine, powdery muscle flesh has turned into just dust. And there is no erosion here whatsoever. None. Zero. There has been no rain on this in probably thousands of years. There is no erosion here. This is 100% for certain on Mars. And I knew that I saw all this when they first went up there in 2014. And I reported all this to the people that should have been paying attention, and they did not. And here's the crab, Mars crab, which is nothing more than an artery with all these little blood vessels going in a vein down here servicing muscle sarcomeres. There it is right here. Again, I have the same thing in my shop. And here it is right here. These are muscle. And they're sarcomeres. They're little things the thing up on Mars, they're just gigantic so you can see them. But this blood is going down into this muscle. This is tendon. And it goes from a bone to a tendon to the muscle, and the muscle have all the blood. They use the blood. See how this is brown and this is pink? Doesn't need any blood. Tendon is just tough, scrappy, tough stuff. And up here on Mars, this is given to, I believe it's basically in the same sort of a situation where it's feeding all these as sarcomeres. This side, I think, is a tendon. Sarcomeres are blocky. Tendons, not so much. Tendons extremely fibrous, but not blocky. This could be right in the middle of bundles of muscle, I don't know. But it's on Mars. And these things are giant here on Earth, they're giant on Mars, they're giant everywhere in the universe. Everything there is, Bennu, they came back with a sample from it, it's a biology. We're just not paying attention to what's reality. It's time to do that. They want $11 billion to go back up to Mars and pick up some samples. They left some sample rocks up there that are just unbelievable. No, they're just like everywhere else. There is nothing but biology. Now, how did it all start? How did it all happen? Who's in charge now? Gods don't die. And I'm looking right now like there was gods. They said there was gods, and as far as I'm concerned, there are gods. And as far as I'm concerned at this point, I'm pointing to Jesus to be the one that's you're going to have to follow him. You're going to have to find him and think about him and follow him to get to a better place. Because as far as I can determine, there's going to be somewhere else. It's up to you to make your own decision on all this stuff. At this point, I found that people, no matter what you say, if they have an opinion, it's probably not going to be changed. Look at this. These are all with those little things sticking out, and they all broke off. You see? Like a leopard. There's a zillion of those in here, just like they broke off. And this one here, I don't know what's going on with this. This is another Alme photo. This is some kind of similar situation, but maybe it's from a different kind of creature? I don't know. That's the problem. A lot of this stuff I don't know precisely what I'm looking at. I don't know the source of it. Let me put it that way. It's all real stuff, I'm sure. The stuff that I had goes way back, long before AI. But what this was, I don't know. But it looks to me like it's some kind of absorption device. From what kind of creature, where in the body, I don't know. But that's what these things do. They absorb different things. And you have your small intestine, you have large intestine, you have your colon, rectum, all those things absorb and discharge different things in different ways. And I always talk about the transition metals. That's the things that bring everything around your body. And that's why we see all these different colored things on Earth and everywhere else. Transition metals primarily, well, they are the source of colored jewelry, basically. They're embedded into silicates, silicon. And they're platy and polar silicates, which gives you the flash. Platy, polar silicates. And that's what created the mud fossils. This salacious ooze that came up from the ocean floor. Now, I guess I'm going to leave it at that for today. I love you all, my good friends. And I guess we just keep putting one foot in front of the other and see what we get. Thank you. All right, let's just get back to how the Grand Canyon formed. Why would this just all of a sudden be missing? All that stuff. Where did it go? Where did it go, and why did it go? If you saw and you understand biology at all, or even the patterns of this, you realize this is not something that just formed for some unknown reason. This is biological. And all these layers are biological layers of tissue. And it can be very deep, the Grand Canyon. And I claim it was gouged out, as I believe I have shown before in this video, or many times at any rate, about the gouging of the Grand Canyon by Venus when it came by, bounced off of our planet. And this Worlds in Collision, Immanuel Velikovsky explains the whole thing. And this really literally proves it. All right, if you can give me any other explanation, and I can tell you where this stuff went to. Let's take a look at that. All right, this is just over the top cool. These are the intestinal villi, and they absorb the food. And here's how they do it, through these. You see the lymph is in the middle, and you got your vein and artery wrapping around, sort of like a lacing. You see it? And that's how they absorb the nutrients, through that villi. And those are in your stomach. Now, I either have shown you or will show you right now how those are actually hoodoos. Okay, my other claim is that this is the intestinal wall, and these are the villi, and these little jobbers here, as you can see, are actually the blood vessels, more than likely. They're one or the other, vein, artery, lymph, and this is the basement when it goes down inside, down in to feed whatever nutrients are bubbling up in there to absorb it. As a matter of fact, I just noticed this. The book I have is spectacularly accurate. This right here is the center lymph of one of these hoodoos. You see how they're not just perfectly straight like this. They go on an angle because they're going up. They're absorbing as they go up. And there's the lymph going down the center. It's precisely what was in my book. You see that? That purple right in the center is the lymph. These little surrounding ones are making their way up to the end to absorb the food or whatever absorption you need to absorb. This is exactly what the hoodoos are. Only this one's sort of upside down. It should be sticking straight up. Alright, you've seen how many unidentified layers there is in every one of these identified layers. There's just zillions and zillions of them. And we can see it because we are on a scale that is become visible. That's the beauty of the mud fossils. Amazing details that are, I believe, are not understood. But they are biological. Now, what happened to all this stuff? What happened to all that stuff? And why would it break like that? Just all of a sudden, this kind of crazy stuff. Okay, I say we were on the surface layer on a plasma membrane in a single cell, each one of those little pillows. Look like somebody's baking bread here. That's what they are. They're skin cells or some kind of cellular coating of an organ or whatever. I believe it's the skin because I can see all these layers. To me, that would indicate fleshy layers right underneath the skin. I'm not sure. It doesn't matter. This is the coating. All this stuff is gone. Where'd it go? Who can explain that? Where did all that stuff go to? It's just a huge gash. Well, if this is skin, which I believe it is, down under there is going to be organs and all kinds of stuff, and there are. Here's Vermilion Cliffs. You see that? This is like stomach or intestinal lining, something down in your guts. Could even be, it's a lining of this tissue. And I'm going to show you it gets much bigger than this. This is just literally blood. This is Vermilion Cliffs. There's no explanation for this, none, zero. This here is, where is it? There's a stomach around here somewhere. Here it is, right here. That's what a stomach tissue looks like. That's walking on some right there, this guy. That's not AI. It does look, I gotta admit, but this is not CGI or any of that stuff. This is long ago. And, you know, all the rest is just, it's you can't deny it, it's there. And this is some kind of intestines. There's a guy standing up there, you see? This is the guts of a creature. So what does that mean? Well, the whole top of his body is ripped off and gone. And now we're down into the intestinal villi. Those are in intestines. That's ripped out of there, just ripped out. You don't get down into somebody's intestines without taking all the other stuff off to get down into it. So where did all that other stuff go? That's the question. All right, Velikovsky, Immanuel Velikovsky, my personal hero, wrote about this exact event happening not that long ago within the memory of humankind. Venus crashed into Earth and ripped the guts, right down to the guts of whatever this creature was. And I don't know what it was, but it was big. Now, this is tissue. It's some kind of a form of tissue. You see that? That's not your average, like, runs the hills and valleys and just little thing. This was, you know, a biology and, you know, blood system running through some creature's body. And look at the colors. The colors indicate different types of chemistry going on there. What it was, I don't know. What it was, I do not know, but I can tell you what, that is not natural landscape just popped up like that for no reason. These fed or extracted, one or the other. And if you look at it very closely, you can, it's very easy to see that this was biology. Look, just look. Now, people will deny this because they deny everything. They say, oh, it just looks like that. You're just seeing things that look like things. No. I'm seeing things. We're right down the street from Bryce Canyon. Now, there was a... Hold on one second. All right, just follow this. Look at this. This is not railroad tracks. Look at this. What is that? What do you think is causing that? And what do you think is causing these discrete layers? Look at this thing. This doesn't stop at just one spot. This whole thing runs up here. Look at these different... This was gouged and ripped out, and all of the stuff that was on top of here was thrown down into Mexico. Look. Does that look just like it should be like that? No. This is biological, and it is the remnants of something. They say, oh, that's plate tectonics. No, it's not. Try to use your mind and start thinking. All of these different colors are from different body chemistry. And we're way down in the guts. You don't have this kind of body stuff all over the surface, you know, unless you gouge the whole guts out. And it is. What was on top of here before is now in Mexico. You see this? This is all biological internal organs. This whole area here. And what was here is now here. All right, so let's take this one step at a time. Venus is basically the same size as us. And it came and it here, now whether it hit, I don't know. But I would say there's no question that its magnetic field has caused a really severe push to the surface of the Earth and to its rotation as well, and to its axis. All of those things happened at the same time. And it was written about that the Earth stood still, which is very possible, and that all these catastrophes happened specifically on the West Coast. And Velikovsky records this very well from the indigenous people that were all down there, and it appears that a bunch of them lived through this. I don't know how, because it would have been just staggeringly unbelievable. But let's say it came in, pow! This is the main impact site. That's why it's so torn up, and all those blocks are sitting, and then just ripped away. All that stuff got tossed down here. All that stuff so we can be down in the guts. Otherwise, there's no place for it to go. It didn't just go nowhere. It's down here. You see? We get back up to where we're in the bowels of the beast. And it pretty much starts up at right about there and goes to what is now down in Mexico. And then, of course, you know about Quetzalcoatl. Everybody's seen him. Right there. Here's his headdress. He He runs all the way up the East Coast. Those are feathers, my friend. Those are not simply mountains. Those are feathers because he was the feathered serpent. I have detailed him in such extreme details. There's his shoulder. Here's his head. His neck. Here's his beards. There's one there and one there. His throat and his, all the way up here, is the Mississippi River. And this is his head dress. And he's spitting out into the gulf of whatever you want to call it now. And that's Quetzalcoatl. And he's good size, and so is Typhon. And there's Typhon right here, doing exactly what it says in Apollodorus 1.6.3. He is attacking the fish who was Ares. And this is Typhon. This is his head. This is his throat. It's called the Drach River. That means the Dragon River. And these are the dragon scales. You see that? They run right straight down his throat. That's the swale of the river. This is all dragon scales. All the way down. All right, and it was written in the ancient texts that Zeus cut his throat with his great and mighty sword. And that's a cut of a throat. And there's the red and the black. We all know this as Mudfossil people. When you have a severe gash, you get both the vein and the artery, and there they are right there. And again, the black always stays away from the red. They don't like each other. The black turns hard and crispy. The red stays fluid and runs. It's just still running today. And this is all just runoff of a decaying body, and this is the fish that he was attacking. All of this over and over and over. Sooner or later, once we start talking about it, I'll back off and just let it go. But this is the guts of a creature that his whole body was ripped off and sent to Mexico. All right? Probably ice sent them to Mexico. Who knows? And there's Devil's Tower, Devil's Foot. The foot comes down here. It's a huge, 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 huge. I've shown all this stuff so many times, I don't know, sooner or later, somebody's going to have to pay attention to it. So I guess that's about all I need to show you for today. If you haven't understood what I've shown you, I don't know what I can show you to make you understand. If there's anybody can come up with any other explanation than I did about these little curlicues coming up like this, all over this membrane layer, other than the fact that that is this, wherever it went to. Right here. You see it? These things spin around right up to the end. Now don't forget, this wasn't just a one-shot deal just in the Grand Canyon. This did the whole world. The world was overwhelmed by the oceans. The salacious ooze went everywhere. It created the red bed, the gray clay, and a black cap because everything combusted. After the flesh and everything was boiled off, creating the red bed, the vegetation and so forth sort of settled in on top of that to create the gray and the green clays. And then the combustion stuff came on top of that and gave it the black cap. And this is everywhere in the world. It's not just here, it's not just there, it's everywhere in the entire world is these three layers. And it's all happened at the same time. And it was because of the impact of Venus into, I believe the central point was the Grand Canyon. That's where I'm going right now, is the Grand Canyon being the point of impact. And this stuff here being what once was here. And at the same time, you know, rocking the world. Now, the Earth spins this way. All right, and if it hit this, it could actually stop it from spinning. Well, what would start it spinning back up again? Scrubbing against the atmosphere as it circles the sun. It's scrubbing against the atmosphere that we're in. Out here, there's atmosphere. If we have to go that direction, it's going to start it to turn, and it's going to find a comfortable point at which it turns every day about approximately the same thing. Because the space around us is fairly homogeneous. So whatever is plowing through today is the same thing tomorrow. And it's at a certain point, it's like rolling down a hill to get to 52 miles an hour, and that's it. The hill just stays the same way. It'll always be 52 miles an hour. That's what's happening with this as it scrubs through space. And the impact looks like it could have been correct. As the Earth turns this way, an impact came this way. Maybe. I'm just trying to figure out what does make sense and what doesn't make sense. And you have to take into account all the little details, otherwise nothing makes sense. And I think this is what makes sense. It was spinning this way, we hit it this way. I mean, Venus hit it this way. And it could have stopped it, because they're field against field. It's like taking two strong magnets and pushing them against each other. At a certain point, you hit a field. And that field has to crunch, and here it did, and squished all that stuff down here, stopped the Earth from spinning, causing all the waters of the deep to come up, and they boiled because of the impact energy. The oceans boiled, the rivers boiled, the skies burnt, everything burnt up that was combustible, basically. The only people who survived, it had to be way up in the mountains and in caves and so forth. They must have seen this thing coming. And I think they might have had forewarning more than just being able to see it. But they weren't the stupid people that we think they were. They could have been pretty sophisticated. Some of the things that were built back then and so forth, very, very sophisticated stuff. Now, Velikovsky said we had at least 2 catastrophes, and maybe more, in recent memory. And I'm talking, when I say recent, 3,500 years ago. It's not that long ago. So, that's my explanation for what's going on this Earth and in space. And we know that asteroid Bennu is a heart, and it's here on Earth, and it's undeniable. How they can get away with denying these things is beyond me. All right, I don't know if I showed you this yet, but I'm going to do it again, because we got to do something about this. They went up and picked up a sample from this asteroid. They have it here on Earth. It's been here for 2 years. There's no question what it is. Listen to this. All right, here we go. Well, okay, my friends, as I am about to show you, this did not deliver key ingredients. They're saying these findings, detailed in recent studies, confirm that asteroids like Bennu likely delivered the key ingredients for life to Earth. No, that is a body part. And I will show you this in extreme detail. That is the same as that. And this is the same as this. This came back from Bennu. This came from a person that had a heart attack. This is a heart. That is a heart. That is a heart. They separate at the valves, and you end up with this, which is that. We have a whole new understanding of the universe. And we have a failure to communicate. They found all the same chemistry, amino acids, RNA, DNA, uracil. I don't know, they claim they haven't found actual DNA, but it's made of the same stuff. Let's just put it that way. There's nothing there that isn't biological, and it's anatomically correct with membranes on both sides of the sarcomeres, which is the same as they have here. This is identical to hearts. There is no question what it is. The question is, why is this allowed to just walk around in circles? How can they, when will someone stand up against the evidence that I'm presenting? If you make claims, which they're making a whole batch of claims about this, you have to stand behind those claims against evidence that is presented, which I am presenting right now. Sarcomeres against sarcomeres. Hearts against hearts. It's been here for 2 years now. The samples from asteroid Bennu returned by NASA's OSIRIS-REx mission contain the fundamental building blocks for DNA and RNA, including all 5 nucleobases: adenine, guanine, cysteine, thymine, adenosine. The samples also include 14 out of 20 amino acids. This is complex stuff. The building blocks of proteins, as well as other complex organic molecules and minerals. They just didn't just accidentally bump into each other. These things are from a creature that was alive. The discovery supports the theory asteroids could have delivered necessary ingredients for life to early Earth. No, they didn't deliver it. They're body parts that are in space. It's not hard to understand. Like I said, the evidence is overwhelming. This is what they wanted to do. They went out to pick up the sample. How can we better understand the diversity of what's in space? Well, you have to look at what you brought back, and here it is right here. These are the sarcomeres, which are the little pinchers of muscle. Anybody that's a top quality anatomist is going to know what that is. They know that there's membranes below and above the sarcomeres so that they can slide in those membranes. And they are phospholipids, which means phosphates, which is exactly what these are. This is the bundles. A heart surgeon will know exactly what that is. Those are heart bundles, and a rope that runs around the heart so that it can twist and do all that stuff. That is what they brought back. Now, that is exactly what heart muscle looks like from here on Earth. This is heart sarcomeres from a heart attack victim. That's not supposed to be broken like that. These are the sarcomeres. They're little blocks. And they have membranes over the top and under them. And they're phospholipids, which means they have phosphate signature on them. And these are the muscle of a heart, which is not much different than other muscles. It's configured a little different. But this is what they came back with. Exact same thing. These layers are under and over. And then there's another layer of sarcomeres, another layer of, there's layer. That's how it is. They have to be separated so they can move independently of the next layer up. And they do along these phospholipid, they're fatty. And they let them slide around. So what did we just see? Heart attack victim, sarcomeres, phosphate layers. We saw what they came back from Bennu with. Exact same thing. We see a heart, which is just like this, with the plumbing pops off because of iron banding. It's fully understood. And you end up with the valves. Just like Psyche has the same valves. Just like Bennu has the same valves because it's a heart. These are the valves here. A lot of valves in hearts. And here's Bennu. I'm sorry, this is Psyche. There's another heart, gigantic. And there's tubes coming out. And these different colors signify different states of oxygenation. And one state goes in, one state comes back. That's why they're so separated. Valves keep them going one direction and the other direction, so forth. And black, yellow, and red are the colors of blood in the different states of oxygenation, just as was given off by, hold on, here it is right here. This was on Comet 67P. They went up and took samples. Now here's Kenneth, here's Juliet, and then we come down with a Murchison. Well, what's Murchison? Murchison was another asteroid, or actually meteorite, that hit Earth. They saw it come down and they went out and picked it up. And they looked at it, and here's the chemistry. This is identical. Virtually identical. Almost no difference whatsoever. Iron, oxides from so forth. Silicon, sodium. Now, what over here, you get the hydrocarbons. What does that mean? Hydrocarbons are in the blood. Those are the things that can burn off easily. They're methanes, basically. And see, down here in the Murchison, they're very low. Up here, they're high. Because out in space, they didn't burn off. Coming through the atmosphere, they burn. And you get low concentrations of them. Fully understood, but they're exactly the same. Only there's lower amounts of them. And this stuff here is basically identical. So that meteorite is the same as what they went out on 67P and collected from the gases shooting out from here and from here. That's not dust or ice blowing off. That's blood that's actually boiling out of there. Space smells like steak. That's exactly what the astronauts say. They come in, they take their suits off, and they go, wow, it smells like a sirloin. That's because of this. This is just shooting off gases into space. And these are from the little tendons that are in this hip. It looks like a hip to me. There's the socket area, and there's where it comes up and it's broken off. And here's what a hip looks like right here. It's like this. Now they break sometimes here, and sometimes way down here. It depends on how you hit it and break it. But that's what a hip is in a human being. Now I don't know where that thing came from. It's in space. I know that's the artery shooting out gases like crazy. It's 500 feet across the artery. These are huge things. And these are the little fluids that are next to the tendons. And those tendons are right here. You see this? Each one of these has to have a little bit of juice in between them to slide and so forth. When the sun hits it just the right way, they smoke off. This is a bundle of tendon or muscle. I think it's tendon. I don't know. But this is a complicated little device, and there's a bunch of different attachments and so forth. But bottom line is, it's a huge, huge, huge asteroid. And if it came and hit Raleigh, North Carolina, this is what it would look like. Now that's a pretty good size. And there's things that are much, much, much bigger than that out there. And I believe that's what happened. We got hit by Venus, basically. That's what the story was. I'm going with that story unless somebody can prove it differently. And we're just going to have to do, I'm reading all the ancient texts now that talk about this. About the creation story, and the way I'm seeing it now, I got a couple of ideas that are a little troubling, but they might have some validity. I don't know. I don't know at this point. All right, so the claim is, I started off saying rocks were body parts. I didn't realize where I was going with this, I got to be honest with you. But then the giants were undeniable, so I had them DNA tested, CAT scanned, all that. Still not accepted. I kept finding more and more things, blood, specimens of crazy things that nobody ever expected. Then I realized that meteorites and all this stuff in space is biology as well. So where do you go with that? The entire universe, as far as I'm concerned right now, is biological in nature. Creatures of what kind? I don't know, because there's dragons, there was Quetzalcoatl, there's Scorpzilla. He's on the west coast. He goes all the way up to the west coast. He got a pincher on the end. That's why I call him Scorpion, Scorpzilla. And this pincher is out at the end of the Aleutian chain. I mean, these things are just staggeringly large. Where'd they come from? Well, Jesus talked about all the different realms and aeons, and, that's the only thing I can take away from it. And I'm going to leave it at that for today. Thank you, my sterlingly wonderful, excellent, thoughtful friends. This is deep. This is as deep as it gets. And some people just aren't ready for it. And that's okay, too. But you should at least know that these things are something different than we have been taught. And if you want to explore that realm, this is the place to do it. All right, I love you all. Thanks. Bye.